I really enjoyed my conversation with Kevin Brown. He is a dear friend, and in my opinion, he's the real deal. I kid Kevin and say he is a player. And when I say that, what I mean is he's not a spectator. He is not content to sit on the sidelines. He is not content to just sit around and talk about issues. He is a player. He wants to be involved in things and make his life and his leadership in his church count. And when he grasped this local concept, marrying the global and local involvement and connection, it had a powerful impact on his church, the Perfecting Church in southern New Jersey, Sewell, New Jersey, actually. And he is engaged in his community. The people from his church are very, very much involved in serving their community in a whole multitude of ways. But they have specifically targeted a part of the world where their church is now becoming very much involved, right in the heart of the war-torn Middle East, in the town of Bethlehem, in the West Bank territories in Israel. But as I thought about this, Kevin had, quite honestly, he had a distinct advantage because he was able to instill this local philosophy right from the beginning of planting his church. He didn't have to deal with decades of tradition about evangelism and missions that had been built up in the minds of a lot of his people. Now, I suspect that there are a lot of people who are going to wrestle with very different kinds of issues than Kevin ever had to. And so I'd like you to take a few minutes to begin to try to think through some what-if questions. Because if you're coming from a church that already has some strategies in place, some practices that are happening, some things that are occurring in missions and evangelism, to whatever degree of effectiveness you have determined they are, nonetheless, realistically, they are happening. So you've got to ask yourself a different set of questions. You have to start thinking about, well, what do we do with the missionaries that our church is already currently supporting? How do we assess the effectiveness of organizations in our community or parachurch organizations that we're supporting? Is that really a good investment of our time and our dollars? And those of you who may be involved with denominational churches, you have to ask yourself, what is the impact of your denominational affiliation? Because I've discovered that a lot of churches give money to their denomination, which is heavily involved in missions, but there's no personal contact with a lot of the missionaries. The relationships with those missionaries usually are minimal or oftentimes even absent. So you're wrestling with an entirely different set of questions. So whether you're a new church plant, which is starting from ground zero and trying to figure out how to implement a global strategy, or whether you're coming from a traditional church and trying to figure out how to implement and transition to a global strategy, you're going to have to ask yourself a different set of questions. I never said this was going to be easy, but this is part of the hard work that you have to do. And so in this activity, I want you to begin to wrestle with some of these questions and start jotting some ideas down, even engaging with some other people, having personal conversations with people who you trust and respect, who can give you some perspective from their ministry and their involvement on the streets, hands-on experience, and what kind of insights can they provide for you as you try to figure out how to forge ahead.